I'm Rachel, 28, and at my brother David's wedding last Saturday, his bride Ashley looked me straight in the eye during the reception and said, "You need to leave. You're embarrassing our family and ruining my perfect day." What Ashley didn't know was that I had quietly paid for 90% of their dream wedding, the $45,000 venue, the designer dress, the gourmet catering, even the honeymoon flights sitting in her purse. As the words left her mouth in front of 150 guests, I realized I had been funding my own humiliation while they painted me as the family failure who never contributed anything meaningful. That night, I made a phone call that would turn their fairy tale wedding into their worst financial nightmare, and the revenge that followed was so perfectly orchestrated that even I was surprised by how devastating it became. Before we dive into this story of ultimate wedding betrayal and the financial justice that followed, I'm dying to know your predictions. What do you think happens when someone discovers they've been secretly funding a wedding where the bride publicly humiliates them? Did I expose everything immediately, quietly withdraw support, or find an even more creative way to make them understand their mistake? Drop your theories in the comments below, hit that like button if you've ever been treated like the family disappointment despite being everyone's financial safety net. And make sure to subscribe because this tale of wedding drama and sweet karma will show you exactly what happens when entitled people bite the hand that literally feeds them. Trust me, the ending will leave you cheering for justice. Growing up as the youngest of 3 children in the Anderson family, I learned early that love was conditional and respect had to be earned through usefulness. While my older siblings David and Michelle were celebrated for their conventional achievements, David's football scholarship and Michelle's sorority presidency, I was the weird one who preferred books to parties and had an uncomfortable talent for seeing through people's facades. The family dynamic was established when I graduated high school at 16 and immediately started working while taking college classes part-time. Instead of pride in my academic acceleration, my parents seemed embarrassed by my intensity. "Rachel's very smart, but she needs to learn to relax and enjoy life," Mom would tell people, as if my drive was a character defect that needed correction. David, 3 years older, had coasted through high school on athletic ability and charm, eventually earning a partial football scholarship to a mid-tier state university. When he tore his ACL sophomore year and lost his scholarship, the family rallied around him with emotional and financial support. Dad took out a second mortgage to keep David in school, and everyone praised his resilience when he changed his major to communications and barely graduated 4 years later. Michelle, 2 years older than David, had chosen the sorority-to-wedding pipeline, dropping out junior year to marry her college boyfriend in an elaborate ceremony that cost my parents $30,000 they couldn't afford. The marriage lasted 18 months, but the debt lasted much longer. Meanwhile, I had completed my bachelor's degree in accounting by age 20, graduating summa cum laude while working 30 hours a week to pay my own tuition. My achievement was acknowledged with a brief "congratulations" at dinner, immediately followed by conversation about David's job search and Michelle's divorce proceedings. After graduation, I landed a position at a prestigious accounting firm in Chicago, earning more at 21 than my parents had ever made combined. Instead of celebration, this success seemed to create resentment and awkwardness within the family. "Rachel's doing very well in her career," Dad would tell relatives, his tone suggesting that my professional success was somehow inappropriate or excessive. "She's very focused on money and advancement." The first financial request came 6 months into my job, when David called asking for help with his student loan payments. He had graduated with $40,000 in debt and was working part-time at a sports bar while figuring out his next move. The monthly payment was $350, which represented about 2 hours of his bartending income, but felt overwhelming to someone accustomed to having his expenses covered by others. "Rach, I know you're making good money now, and this would really help me get back on my feet," he said, his voice carrying the casual expectation that I would naturally want to help family. I agreed to cover his payments temporarily, thinking it would be a few months until he found full-time employment. For years later, I was still making those payments, and David was still figuring out his next move, while working the same part-time job and living in our parents' basement. The requests multiplied over time. Michelle needed help with her post-divorce apartment deposit. Mom needed assistance with medical bills when Dad's insurance didn't cover her physical therapy. Dad needed support when his small construction business faced cash flow problems during the slow winter months. Each request came with promises of repayment and expressions of gratitude, but the repayments never materialized and the gratitude evolved into expectation. Within 3 years, I was essentially supporting 2 households, my own modest apartment in Chicago and my family's lifestyle back home in Ohio. The most painful aspect wasn't the money itself. It was the way my contributions were simultaneously essential and invisible. At family gatherings, they would discuss their plans and achievements as if the money materializing to support them was just a natural occurrence, like weather or gravity. David's taking some time to find the right opportunity, Mom would tell relatives, not mentioning that his time was funded by his sister's salary. Michelle's doing so well getting back on her feet after her divorce, she'd add, without acknowledging who was paying for that apartment and car payment. When I was present for these conversations, I became a background figure whose success was vaguely embarrassing rather than worth celebrating. Rachel's still working in Chicago, they'd say, as if my career was a phase I hadn't grown out of rather than the foundation supporting everyone's lifestyle. The emotional manipulation was subtle but constant. When I expressed any frustration about the financial burden, I was reminded of how much the family had invested in me growing up. When I suggested that my siblings might contribute to household expenses or family emergencies, I was told I was being selfish and forgetting where I came from. Family helps family, Rachel, Dad would say whenever I hesitated about a new financial request. We raised you with good values, and now you have the opportunity to share your blessings with people who love you. But the sharing was entirely one-directional. When I had been hospitalized with appendicitis and faced unexpected medical bills, my request for family help was met with lectures about emergency funds and better financial planning. When I mentioned wanting to buy a car to replace my aging Honda, I was told that luxury purchases should wait until I had more savings. Meanwhile, David's desire for a motorcycle was treated as a reasonable aspiration that the family should support, and Michelle's need for a vacation after her stressful divorce was considered essential for her emotional recovery. The breaking point should have come when I realized I was living like a graduate student despite earning a 6-figure salary, sharing a tiny apartment with a roommate while my siblings enjoyed comfortable lifestyles funded by my sacrifice. But I had internalized their messaging that my success was somehow undeserved and that supporting them was my obligation rather than my choice. Over 5 years, I had sent home $127,000 while denying myself the lifestyle my income should have supported. I told myself it was temporary, that eventually they would become self-sufficient and grateful for my help during their transition period. Instead, their dependence deepened and their sense of entitlement grew. I wasn't their successful daughter and sister. I was their personal bank account, expected to fund their choices while accepting their casual disrespect and systematic exclusion from the family narrative. The stage was set for the ultimate test of this toxic dynamic when David announced his engagement to Ashley, a woman who shared the family's view that I was an embarrassment to be tolerated rather than an asset to be valued. David's engagement to Ashley Martinez was announced at a family dinner where I learned that I would be expected to play my usual role, invisible financial provider whose contributions would be acknowledged privately but never publicly credited. Ashley came from what she considered a sophisticated background. Her parents owned a chain of tanning salons, and she had very specific ideas about how her wedding should reflect her elevated social status. "We're thinking about the Grandview Manor for the reception," Ashley explained during our first wedding planning meeting, her voice breathless with excitement about what she clearly saw as the social event that would establish her position in the community. "It's where all the best families have their celebrations. The Martinez family has standards to maintain." The venue she described was indeed elegant, but extraordinarily expensive, $30,000 just for the space rental, before considering catering, decorations, music, or any of the other elements required for the perfect day she envisioned. When the conversation turned to budget, David looked directly at me with the casual expectation I had grown accustomed to over years of financial requests. Rach, since you're doing so well with your career, we were hoping you might want to contribute to making this day special for us. You know, as a wedding gift from my sister. The request was framed as an opportunity for me to demonstrate family love rather than an obligation, but the underlying assumption was clear: my success created a responsibility to fund their celebration. What kind of contribution did you have in mind? I asked. Ashley pulled out a wedding planning binder that contained more detailed financial analysis than David had ever applied to any life decision. She had researched venues, caterers, photographers, and florists with the thoroughness of a professional event planner. Well, the venue is $30,000, catering for 150 guests is $28,000, photography is $4,000, flowers are $6,000, the band is $5,000, and then there are smaller things like invitations, favors, decorations. She continued reading from her list with the enthusiasm of someone describing a luxury vacation rather than a single-day event. The total budget was approaching $85,000. More than many people's annual salary for a 6-hour celebration. That's quite an expensive wedding, I said carefully. Have you considered scaling back some elements to make it more affordable? The suggestion was met with the kind of shocked silence usually reserved for major social violations. Scale back. Ashley's voice rose in pitch. Rachel, this is my wedding day. This is the most important day of my life. I'm not going to compromise my vision because some people don't understand the importance of doing things properly. I understand that your wedding is important, but $85,000 is more than most people's yearly salary. Successful weddings can cost much less. Successful weddings, David interrupted, aren't trying to bring together families with our kind of background and expectations. Ashley's parents have certain standards, and we want to honor those standards appropriately. The conversation revealed that the wedding wasn't really about celebrating their relationship. It was about demonstrating social status to a community that Ashley desperately wanted to impress. And they expected me to fund this demonstration while being treated as a barely tolerated family member whose presence might detract from their sophisticated image. Over the following months, the wedding planning became increasingly elaborate and expensive, with every decision justified by references to tradition, family honor, and doing things the right way. When I suggested more practical alternatives, I was told that I didn't understand the social significance of wedding customs. The most telling aspect of the planning process was how my contributions were handled. Every major expense was presented to me as an urgent need that required immediate payment to secure vendors or avoid cancellation fees. I would wire money or write checks, and then watch as David and Ashley discussed their wedding choices with family and friends. We decided on the premium catering package, Ashley would tell people, because we wanted our guests to have the best possible experience. There was never any acknowledgement that we actually meant Rachel's bank account. David chose the most elegant flowers for the ceremony, she'd add, never mentioning that David's choice had been limited to options that fit within the budget I had provided. The psychological impact was devastating. I was simultaneously essential to the event's success and erased from the narrative of how that success was achieved. Every dollar I spent purchased another element of a celebration that would publicly demonstrate their good fortune while requiring my invisibility to maintain the illusion. But the most painful aspect was their treatment of my role in the actual wedding. As the planning progressed, it became clear that Ashley viewed me as a financial resource rather than a family member deserving of respect and inclusion. Rachel, we need to talk about your dress for the wedding, she said during one of our planning sessions, her tone suggesting she was about to deliver disappointing news. I know you'll want to look appropriate for the photographs. What did you have in mind? Well, I've picked out dresses for the other family members that coordinate with our color scheme and the overall aesthetic. But for you, I think something more understated would be better. We don't want anything that might compete with the bridal party or draw attention away from the ceremony. The understated dress she suggested was essentially a beige sack that would ensure I looked as invisible as my financial contributions were treated. When I suggested alternatives that were still appropriate but more flattering, she became defensive. Rachel, I really need you to trust my judgment about what works for this event. I have a vision for how everything should look, and your dress needs to fit within that vision. Similarly, my seating assignment was relegated to a table with distant relatives and family friends I barely knew, far from the head table where other family members would be celebrating. When I asked about this, Ashley's explanation was revealing. We wanted to put you with people who would appreciate your practical perspective on things. The other tables are more focused on social conversation that might not be as interesting to someone with your work background. The message was clear. I was welcome to fund their celebration, but my presence should be as inconspicuous as possible to avoid undermining the image they wanted to project. As the wedding date approached, I realized I had spent $47,000 to purchase my own exclusion from a family celebration. Every check I had written had bought another element of an event designed to demonstrate their success while minimizing my role in achieving it. But I had also begun to document everything, every payment, every slight, every casual dismissal of my contributions. I wasn't sure what I would do with this documentation, but something about their treatment was building toward a confrontation that would force the truth into the open. The morning of David's wedding dawned perfect and clear, which felt ironically appropriate for what would become the most clarifying day of my adult life. I arrived at the venue early to help with last-minute preparations, wearing the beige understated dress Ashley had selected and carrying a gift envelope containing the final payment for their honeymoon, $3,500 for flights and resort accommodations in Maui that they had casually mentioned needing help with just 2 weeks earlier. The Grandview Manor looked exactly as expensive as it had cost. Every detail was perfect, from the imported flowers to the premium linens to the professional string quartet performing during the cocktail hour. As I watched the setup, I calculated that I had personally funded about 90% of what I was seeing, while David and Ashley had contributed primarily their presence and preferences. The ceremony itself was beautiful, and I found myself genuinely happy for David despite everything else. He looked nervous and excited in his rented tuxedo, and Ashley was radiant in her $4,200 designer gown. For a moment, watching them exchange vows, I forgot about the financial arrangements and just enjoyed seeing my brother begin this new chapter of his life. The problems began during the cocktail hour, when I tried to mingle with other guests and participate in the celebration I had made possible. Every conversation seemed to reinforce my outsider status within the family narrative. "You must be so proud of David and Ashley," said one of Ashley's relatives, making small talk while we waited for dinner to begin. "They've done such a beautiful job with this wedding. It must have taken them years to save for something this elegant." "It is a beautiful wedding," I agreed, not knowing how to respond to the assumption that they had funded it themselves. "Ashley tells me you work in Chicago," another guest continued. "It must be nice to have a career, but I imagine you envy David and Ashley for finding each other and being able to afford this kind of celebration. Not everyone is lucky enough to achieve this level of success so young." The comments continued throughout the cocktail hour, each one reinforcing the narrative that David and Ashley were successful young professionals who had earned their elegant celebration through hard work and good choices, while I was the single career woman whose focus on work had somehow prevented me from achieving similar happiness and prosperity. What was most painful was watching my own family participate in this narrative. When relatives asked about my contributions to the wedding, Mom would smile and say, "Rachel was so sweet to help out a little bit, but David and Ashley really made this happen themselves." When someone complimented the venue choice, Dad would explain that David has always had good taste and Ashley's family has high standards. They weren't going to settle for anything less than the best. I was standing right there, listening to my own family erase my contributions while taking credit for choices that had been constrained entirely by the budget I had provided. But the breaking point came during the dinner service, when Ashley's maid of honor gave a speech about the couple's journey to their wedding day. "David and Ashley are such an inspiration to all of us," she began, her voice carrying across the elegantly decorated dining room. "They've shown us what it means to work hard, save money, and invest in your dreams. This beautiful celebration is a testament to their dedication and their commitment to doing things the right way." The speech continued with praise for their financial responsibility and their ability to prioritize what really matters in life. Every word was a direct contradiction of reality, but the 150 guests applauded enthusiastically, celebrating David and Ashley's supposed achievement in funding their own elegant wedding. I sat at my assigned table with distant relatives, listening to my brother and sister-in-law being praised for virtues they didn't possess and accomplishments they hadn't achieved, while my actual contributions were erased from the story entirely. After dinner, as the reception moved into the dancing portion of the evening, I approached Ashley to congratulate her and give her the envelope containing the honeymoon payment. "Ashley, you look absolutely beautiful, and the wedding is perfect," I said, extending the envelope. "David is lucky to have you." She took the envelope without opening it, clearly assuming it contained a traditional wedding gift rather than flight confirmations for their trip to Maui. "Thank you, Rachel," she said, her voice carrying a dismissive politeness that suggested she was already looking past me to more important guests. "I'm glad you could be here for our special day." "I wouldn't have missed it," I replied. "I hope you and David have a wonderful honeymoon." "Oh, we will. David's been saving for months to surprise me with this trip. He's so thoughtful and responsible with money." The casual lie about David's financial contribution to their honeymoon was delivered with such confidence that I wondered if she had genuinely forgotten who had actually paid for their flights, or if the deception was so complete that she believed her own fiction. But the moment that changed everything came an hour later, when I was standing near the bar talking with one of David's college friends about his new job. Ashley appeared beside us, clearly having had several glasses of champagne, with an expression that suggested she had something important to say. "Rachel," she began, her voice loud enough to catch the attention of nearby guests, "I need to talk to you about something." "Of course," I said, assuming she wanted to thank me privately for the honeymoon contribution. Instead, she launched into a speech that would end our relationship forever. "I know you think you're important because you have some fancy job in Chicago, but you need to understand something. This is David's day, not yours. You've been walking around here acting like you're some kind of VIP, but honestly, you're embarrassing our family." The accusation was so unexpected and unjust that I needed a moment to process what she was saying. I hadn't been acting like a VIP, I had been trying to participate in a celebration that I had literally made possible. "Ashley, I'm not sure what you mean." "What I mean," she continued, her voice getting louder and attracting more attention from other guests, "is that you need to stop acting like this wedding is about you. Nobody cares about your job or your money or whatever you think makes you special. This is about David and me, and your whole vibe is just wrong for what we're trying to achieve here." By now, at least 20 people were listening to this completely unprovoked attack, including several family members who were watching with expressions ranging from shock to embarrassment. "You know what?" Ashley concluded, her voice reaching a crescendo that could be heard across half the reception area. "You need to leave. You're embarrassing our family and ruining my perfect day. This celebration is for people who actually support David and me, not people who just want to show off how much money they make." The silence that followed was deafening. Every conversation in our section of the reception had stopped, and I could feel dozens of eyes focused on me, waiting to see how I would respond to this public humiliation. For a moment, I considered defending myself, explaining exactly how much I had supported David and Ashley's perfect day. I could have pulled out my phone and shown bank records proving that the elegant venue, gourmet dinner, premium bar, and honeymoon trip she was so proud of had been funded entirely by the woman she was asking to leave. Instead, I made a different choice. I smiled calmly, nodded to Ashley, and said, "You're absolutely right. I should go." I walked to the exit without saying goodbye to anyone else, got in my car, and drove back to my hotel. But I wasn't finished with David and Ashley's perfect day. I had some phone calls to make. I spent the first hour after leaving the reception sitting in my hotel room, processing what had just happened and making a list of every payment I had made for David and Ashley's wedding. The total was staggering, $47,300 in direct expenses, plus countless smaller contributions that brought the figure close to $50,000. But more than the money, I was calculating the emotional cost of 5 years spent funding a family that saw me as an embarrassment rather than an asset. Every dollar I had sent home had purchased another day of their comfortable lifestyle and another opportunity for them to treat me with casual disrespect and systematic exclusion. Ashley's public humiliation had been the catalyst, but the underlying problem was much deeper. I had been enabling people who didn't value me, and they had become so comfortable with the arrangement that they felt entitled to abuse me while benefiting from my generosity. As I sat there making my list, I realized I had documentation for nearly every payment: bank transfers, canceled checks, credit card statements, vendor confirmations. I had essentially funded their entire lifestyle while creating a paper trail that proved their dependence on my support. But I also realized something else: most of the wedding expenses were still in my name. When Ashley had needed to book vendors quickly to secure dates and services, she had asked me to put deposits on my credit cards and arrange payments through my accounts. "It's just easier," she had said, "since you're handling the financial coordination anyway." The venue was booked under my name with my credit card. The catering was arranged through my account. The photographer, the band, the flowers, nearly every major vendor had my contact information and payment details because I had been the one actually coordinating and funding their services. Technically, I hadn't just paid for David and Ashley's wedding. I owned it. At 11 p.m., 3 hours after leaving the reception, I began making phone calls. The first call was to the hotel where David and Ashley were supposed to check in the next morning for their wedding night suite. The reservation was under my name and charged to my card. "Hi, this is Rachel Anderson. I have a reservation for tomorrow night that I need to cancel due to a family emergency." "Of course, Ms. Anderson. Let me pull that up. Yes, the honeymoon suite for Mr. and Mrs. Anderson. I'm sorry to hear about the emergency. Would you like to reschedule for a different date?" "No, I need to cancel entirely." "What's your cancellation policy for same-day changes?" "Since it's less than 24 hours, there would normally be a full charge, but given the circumstances, I can waive the fee and process a full refund to your card." One phone call, and David and Ashley's wedding night accommodations had vanished. The second call was to the airline, regarding the flights to Maui that were booked and paid for under my name. "I need to cancel 2 tickets for tomorrow's flight to Honolulu due to a medical emergency in the family." "I'm sorry to hear that. Let me see what options we have. Since this is within 24 hours of departure, the tickets aren't normally refundable, but we do have a medical emergency clause. If you can provide documentation." "Actually, let me just cancel them and take the loss. This situation needs to be resolved immediately." "Of course. I'll cancel both tickets and process whatever refund is available according to the fare rules." With 2 phone calls, David and Ashley's honeymoon had been eliminated. But I was just getting started. The third call was to the venue coordinator at Grandview Manor, where the reception was still in full swing. "Hi, this is Rachel Anderson. I'm the primary contact for the Anderson-Martinez wedding that's happening tonight." "Oh yes, Ms. Anderson. How is everything going? I hope you're enjoying the celebration. There's been a significant change in circumstances. I need to inform you that I'm withdrawing authorization for any additional charges to my accounts, and I'll need to discuss refund policies for services that haven't been fully rendered." "I'm not sure I understand." "The reception is currently in progress. The reception can continue, but any additional services, late-night snacks, overtime fees, damage charges, anything beyond the basic package, will need to be handled by someone other than me. I'm no longer responsible for expenses related to this event. This is highly unusual. Can I speak with the bride or groom about this change?" "You're welcome to speak with them, but they'll need to provide alternative payment methods for any additional charges. My financial responsibility for this event ends tonight." The fourth call was to the photography studio, regarding the wedding photos and albums that were supposed to be delivered over the following weeks. "Hi, this is Rachel Anderson. I have a concern about the Anderson-Martinez wedding photography package that's scheduled for processing." "Yes, we shot that wedding tonight. Beautiful ceremony and reception. What can I help you with?" "The financial arrangements have changed. The photos were taken, which is fine, but I need to cancel the album packages, prints, and digital delivery services that haven't been completed yet." "That's unusual. Usually couples are very excited about getting their photos after the wedding." "I'm sure they are, but they'll need to make their own arrangements for purchasing the photos directly from your studio. I won't be covering those costs. One by one, I contacted every vendor who had ongoing responsibilities or potential additional charges. The band wouldn't receive their final payment for extended playtime. The florist wouldn't be paid for next-day cleanup services. The catering company was informed that any overtime or additional service charges would need alternative payment authorization. By 2 a.m., I had systematically withdrawn my financial support from every aspect of David and Ashley's wedding and honeymoon that hadn't already been completed. They could finish their reception with the services already paid for, but their next morning would bring a series of very unpleasant surprises. But the most important call was the last one I made, to my own bank, requesting fraud alerts and payment blocks on all accounts that had been used for family expenses. I need to secure my accounts because of potential unauthorized usage by family members who have had access to my payment information. Of course, we'll put immediate holds on any unusual charges and require verification for any payments to vendors or individuals who have received money from you previously. The technical term for what I had done was withdrawing financial consent. But the practical impact was that David and Ashley would wake up from their wedding night to discover that their honeymoon had been canceled, their accommodations were unavailable, and several vendors were demanding immediate payment for services they had assumed were handled. I had given them exactly what Ashley had asked for: a wedding celebration for people who actually support David and me, not people who just want to show off how much money they make. Now they could support themselves without any contributions from someone who was apparently too embarrassing to tolerate at their reception. As I finally tried to sleep that night, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Complete control over my own financial resources and a clear understanding of my actual value to the people who claimed to be my family. Tomorrow would be very educational for everyone involved. I woke up Sunday morning to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages, all from various family members who were beginning to understand the scope of what I had done. The wedding reception had ended around midnight, and by Sunday morning, David and Ashley were discovering that their post-wedding plans had systematically evaporated. The first call I answered was from David at 8:30 a.m., his voice shaking with panic and anger. "Rachel, what the hell did you do? Ashley and I got to the hotel this morning, and they have no record of our reservation. They're saying it was canceled last night due to a family emergency. Did you cancel our wedding night suite?" "Yes, I did. Ashley made it very clear that I was embarrassing your family and ruining her perfect day, so I removed my embarrassing presence from all aspects of your celebration." "What does that mean? What else did you cancel?" "I canceled everything that hadn't already been completed and was still under my name and payment authorization. The wedding reception happened because those services had already been rendered, but anything scheduled for after the reception, well, you'll need to handle those arrangements yourself." "Rachel, you can't just cancel our honeymoon because Ashley said something stupid at the reception. She was drunk and stressed about the wedding. She didn't mean it." "Actually, David, I think she meant exactly what she said. She told me the celebration was for people who actually support you, not people who just want to show off their money. So I'm giving you the opportunity to be supported by people who actually value your relationship." The conversation continued for 20 minutes, with David alternating between anger and desperation as he began to understand that their Hawaii trip, their wedding night accommodations, and several vendor services had been eliminated overnight. "Do you have any idea how much it's going to cost to rebook flights to Hawaii on the same day we're supposed to leave?" "David, I have an excellent idea of how much it costs, since I paid for those flights originally. But Ashley made it clear that my contributions weren't welcome, so now you can handle the expenses yourselves." "But we don't have that kind of money. You know we've been saving for the wedding, and we used up everything we had." The admission was telling. They had been saving for the wedding while I paid for 90% of the expenses. Their entire financial contribution had been a few $1,000s while they took credit for the elegant celebration my money had made possible. The second call came from Ashley herself an hour later, her voice alternating between tears and rage. "Rachel, I cannot believe you would sabotage my honeymoon because you got your feelings hurt at my wedding. This is the most selfish, vindictive thing I've ever seen." "Ashley, I didn't sabotage anything. I simply withdrew my support from people who found my presence embarrassing and inappropriate. You said the celebration was for people who actually support you, not people showing off their money. I took your words seriously. That's not what I meant, and you know it. I was just stressed about the wedding, and I said things I didn't mean. Which part didn't you mean? The part where you said I was embarrassing your family, the part where you said I was ruining your perfect day, or the part where you told me to leave, because I wasn't the right kind of person for your celebration. The silence stretched uncomfortably long as Ashley realized that she couldn't take back her words without admitting they had been deliberately cruel rather than stress-induced mistakes. Even if I said things I shouldn't have said, that doesn't give you the right to destroy our honeymoon. Ashley, I didn't destroy your honeymoon. I simply stopped paying for it. You and David are welcome to take any honeymoon you can afford to fund yourselves. The third call, from Mom, revealed how completely the family had misunderstood the situation. Rachel, honey, I heard there was some kind of misunderstanding at the wedding last night, and now David and Ashley are having problems with their travel arrangements. Can you please fix whatever went wrong so they can get to their honeymoon? Mom, there wasn't a misunderstanding. Ashley told me I was embarrassing the family and needed to leave the reception. So I left, and I also removed my financial support from their post-wedding plans. But Rachel, Ashley was just overwhelmed by the wedding. You know how stressful these events can be. Surely you're not going to punish them for something said in a moment of pressure. I'm not punishing anyone, Mom. I'm just no longer paying for celebrations where I'm told I'm unwelcome. If Ashley wants to have opinions about my presence at events I fund, she can fund those events herself. But they can't afford to replace the honeymoon on such short notice. The flights and hotel for Hawaii cost thousands of dollars. Yes, they do. I know exactly how much they cost because I paid for them originally. But since Ashley doesn't want support from people who show off their money, she and David can figure out alternative arrangements. The conversation with Mom revealed that the family still didn't understand the fundamental issue. They thought this was about hurt feelings that could be soothed with apologies and explanations about wedding stress. They didn't realize that Ashley's outburst had simply been the final straw in a relationship built on systematic disrespect and financial exploitation. The most illuminating call came from Dad, who tried to broker a resolution by appealing to family loyalty and practical considerations. Rachel, I understand you're upset about whatever happened at the wedding, but you're hurting innocent people with this reaction. The vendors, the travel companies, they're all going to lose money because you're canceling things at the last minute. Dad, the vendors will be fine. Most of them have cancellation policies that protect them from financial losses. And the travel companies deal with cancellations all the time. The only people being hurt are David and Ashley, who are learning that their lifestyle has been dependent on someone they felt comfortable treating badly. But the family, Rachel. This is going to cause problems between all of us. David and Ashley are going to be angry. Your mother is upset, and this whole situation could damage our relationships permanently. Dad, what relationship? I've been sending money home for 5 years while being treated like an embarrassment to the family. Yesterday, Ashley told me in front of dozens of people that I needed to leave because I was ruining her perfect day. What exactly am I supposed to be preserving here? But family forgives, Rachel. People say things they don't mean when they're stressed. You can't let one bad moment destroy years of relationships. One bad moment? Dad, this wasn't one bad moment. This was the culmination of years of being treated like a walking ATM whose presence was tolerated only because of what I could provide financially. Ashley just said out loud what you've all been thinking for years. By noon, I had received calls from extended family members who had attended the wedding and were trying to understand what had happened. The story they were getting from David and Ashley was that I had overreacted to wedding stress and sabotaged their honeymoon out of jealousy and spite. But some of the guests had witnessed Ashley's unprovoked attack and were beginning to ask questions about the family dynamics they had observed. My cousin Jennifer called with a perspective that proved I wasn't imagining the dysfunction. Rachel, I was standing right there when Ashley went off on you last night, and I have to say, it was completely out of line. You weren't doing anything wrong, you were just standing there talking to someone. Her whole speech about you embarrassing the family was bizarre and mean. Thank you for saying that, Jennifer. I was starting to wonder if I had missed something. No, you didn't miss anything. And honestly, after watching the family dynamics all evening, I kept wondering how David and Ashley could afford such an expensive wedding. They're both working entry-level jobs, but the venue and everything looked like it cost a fortune. The conversation with Jennifer confirmed what I had suspected. People had noticed the disconnect between David and Ashley's apparent means and their expensive celebration. My financial contributions hadn't been as invisible as the family had pretended. But the most revealing conversation came Monday morning when I received a call from Ashley's maid of honor, who had given the speech praising David and Ashley's financial responsibility. "Rachel, this is embarrassing to ask, but Ashley told me you might be able to help with something. She and David are trying to figure out how to get to Hawaii for their honeymoon, and the flights are really expensive to book at the last minute. I'm sorry, but I won't be providing any more financial assistance to David and Ashley." Oh, well, Ashley also mentioned that some of the wedding vendors are asking for additional payments that she thought were already handled. The photographer wants money for the album package, and the band is asking about overtime fees. Those vendors will need to work out payment arrangements directly with David and Ashley. I'm no longer handling wedding-related expenses. But I thought the wedding expenses were covered. Ashley kept talking about how they had saved up for everything and planned so carefully. The conversation revealed that Ashley had been maintaining the fiction about their financial responsibility even with her closest friends, never acknowledging that the elegant celebration had been funded by someone else entirely. "Actually," I said, deciding that the truth should start coming out, "I paid for about 90% of David and Ashley's wedding expenses. The venue, catering, photography, flowers, band, and honeymoon were all funded by me. David and Ashley contributed a few $1,000s and took credit for the entire celebration." The silence that followed was long and telling. Oh my God. Rachel, I had no idea. The way Ashley talked about their wedding planning, I thought they had saved up for years to afford something that elegant. She never mentioned that you were paying for everything. Most people didn't know because David and Ashley preferred to take credit for achievements they hadn't earned. But after Ashley's behavior at the reception, I decided to stop enabling that fiction. As word spread about the actual financial arrangements behind David and Ashley's wedding, the narrative began to shift. Instead of being seen as the jealous sister who had sabotaged a honeymoon, I was increasingly being viewed as someone who had been systematically taken advantage of and had finally reached her breaking point. But the most important change was internal. For the first time in years, I felt completely in control of my financial decisions and completely clear about my actual value to people who claimed to care about me. David and Ashley would either learn to appreciate support when they received it, or they would learn to live without support they had taken for granted. Either way, they would never again be able to treat me badly while benefiting from my generosity. The education was just beginning. 3 months after David's wedding, the full scope of the financial and social earthquake I had triggered became clear. What had started as a single evening's worth of canceled arrangements had evolved into a complete restructuring of family relationships and a harsh education in the real cost of taking people for granted. The immediate aftermath had been chaotic but predictable. David and Ashley had spent their honeymoon week at a budget motel 2 hours from home instead of luxury resorts in Maui, using money borrowed from Ashley's parents to afford even that modest accommodation. The contrast between their planned exotic getaway and their actual bargain basement alternative became a source of lasting tension in their new marriage. But the real consequences emerged over the following weeks as various bills and obligations came due. The wedding vendors who had expected final payments began calling David and Ashley directly, creating a series of financial crises that forced them to confront the reality of expenses they had never budgeted for because they had never been responsible for them. The photography bill was the first major shock. The ceremony and reception photos had been taken, but the album packages, prints, and digital delivery services I had canceled represented an additional $2,800 that David and Ashley had never planned to pay themselves. "We thought all the photography was handled," David explained during one of our increasingly rare phone conversations. "Ashley had talked to you about wedding photos, and we assumed that meant everything was covered." David, I paid for the basic photography service to document your ceremony. The albums and prints were additional packages that you'll need to purchase yourselves if you want them. But we don't have $2,800 for wedding photos. We used up all our savings on the parts of the wedding that you didn't cover. The admission revealed how completely they had structured their wedding budget around my contributions. Their savings had covered roughly 10% of their celebration, while they had planned to receive credit for the entire elegant affair. Similar revelations emerged with other vendors. The band's overtime charges for extended reception music totaled $800. The florist's next-day cleanup service was $400. The catering company's premium bar package had additional fees they hadn't anticipated. Each bill created a new crisis that forced David and Ashley to confront expenses they had never planned to handle independently. But the financial consequences were just the beginning. The social fallout from Ashley's wedding outburst and my subsequent withdrawals had created rifts within our extended family that affected relationships far beyond my immediate household. Relatives who had attended the wedding began taking sides based on their understanding of what had actually happened. Those who had witnessed Ashley's unprovoked attack increasingly supported my decision to withdraw financial support. Others, operating with David and Ashley's version of events, viewed me as vindictive and unreasonable. The most telling development came when extended family members began questioning other aspects of David and Ashley's lifestyle that hadn't added up. If they couldn't afford their own wedding photos, how had they managed to fund such an expensive celebration in the first place? Cousin Jennifer became something of a family detective, putting together pieces of information she had gathered over the years about David's unemployment periods, Ashley's part-time work schedule, and their expensive lifestyle choices that had never made financial sense. I started thinking about David's motorcycle and Ashley's designer purses and that apartment they live in, Jennifer told me during a phone call 6 weeks after the wedding. None of it added up with what they claimed to earn. But if you've been supporting them financially for years, suddenly everything makes sense. As questions multiplied, David and Ashley found themselves in the uncomfortable position of having to explain how they had afforded their lifestyle without acknowledging my contributions. The lies they had told about their financial independence began unraveling under scrutiny from family members who were no longer willing to accept their explanations at face value. Meanwhile, I was experiencing something I hadn't felt in years: financial freedom and emotional clarity. Without the constant drain of supporting David's lifestyle and responding to family financial emergencies, I had resources and energy to invest in my own goals and relationships. I bought a beautiful condo in downtown Chicago, something I had been postponing for years while sending money home to Ohio. I started traveling internationally, taking vacations I had denied myself while funding other people's entertainment. I began dating seriously for the first time in years, no longer constrained by the emotional exhaustion of managing family financial crises. But the most important change was psychological. I had finally learned to distinguish between people who loved me and people who loved what I could provide for them. The family members who contacted me only when they needed money had revealed themselves clearly, while the relatives who checked on my well-being without requesting assistance had proven their genuine care. The test came 4 months after the wedding, when David called with what he presented as a family emergency requiring immediate financial intervention. "Rachel, I need your help. Ashley lost her job, and we're going to be short on rent this month. It's just temporary until she finds something else, but we need about $1,500 to get through the next few weeks." The request was delivered with the same casual expectation that had characterized 5 years of family financial support. David seemed to believe that our wedding crisis had been a temporary disruption rather than a permanent change in our relationship dynamics. "David, I'm not going to provide financial assistance. But this is different, Rachel. This isn't about the wedding or Ashley's comments. This is a real emergency that could affect our housing situation." "David, Ashley losing her job isn't my emergency. It's your emergency, and you'll need to handle it with your own resources." "What resources?" "You know we don't have savings because we spent everything on wedding expenses that you didn't cover." "Then maybe you'll need to consider downsizing your lifestyle, finding additional income sources, or asking Ashley's family for help." "But I'm no longer your financial safety net." The conversation revealed that David still didn't understand the fundamental change in our relationship. He thought I was being stubborn about the wedding incident, not recognizing that I had made a permanent decision to stop enabling his financial dependence. Similar requests came from other family members over the following months, each one testing whether my boundaries were real or just temporary reactions to the wedding drama. Mom asked for help with car repairs. Dad requested assistance with business expenses. Michelle needed support during a job transition. In each case, I declined politely but firmly, explaining that I was no longer providing family financial assistance. The reactions ranged from hurt feelings to angry accusations, but the message was gradually received. The bank of Rachel was permanently closed. The most dramatic confrontation came 8 months after the wedding, when David and Ashley's financial situation became unsustainable without my support. They had accumulated credit card debt trying to maintain their lifestyle, Ashley hadn't found stable employment, and they were facing eviction from their apartment. David called with what amounted to an ultimatum disguised as a family reconciliation opportunity. Rachel, Mom is planning a family dinner for Christmas, and she wants everyone to be there so we can work out this situation between us. Ashley is willing to apologize for what she said at the wedding, and we want to find a way to move forward as a family. What kind of moving forward did you have in mind? We want to go back to normal. You're our sister, we're your family, and families help each other through difficult times. Ashley made a mistake at the wedding, but that doesn't mean we should destroy our relationships permanently. What would normal look like, David? It would look like understanding that people make mistakes, forgiving those mistakes, and supporting each other the way families are supposed to. We need help getting back on our feet financially, and you're in a position to provide that help. The request was revealing in its assumptions. David's idea of normal involved Ashley apologizing for her wedding outburst so that I would resume funding their lifestyle. He hadn't considered the possibility that I might prefer my new life without the constant stress of managing their financial crises. David, I appreciate that Ashley is willing to apologize, but I'm not interested in returning to the old arrangement where I fund your lifestyle while being treated like an embarrassment to the family. But that's not how we treated you. David, Ashley told me in front of 50 people that I was embarrassing your family and needed to leave your wedding reception. That wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. That was her revealing how she actually felt about me after I had paid for 90% of her celebration. She was drunk and stressed about the wedding. Maybe, but drunk people usually tell the truth about their real feelings. Ashley told the truth about how much respect she had for someone who had funded her dream wedding. The conversation ended with David hanging up in frustration, but it had served its purpose. I had clarified that my boundaries were permanent, not temporary reactions to be overcome through apologies and family pressure. 1 year after David's wedding, I was sitting in my beautiful downtown Chicago condo, looking out at the city's skyline while preparing for a 2-week vacation to Europe. The kind of trip I had always wanted to take, but had never been able to afford while supporting my family's lifestyle. The transformation in my life had been more dramatic than I could have imagined when I walked out of that reception. The financial freedom was just the beginning. Without the constant stress of managing family financial crises, I had energy and resources to pursue interests and relationships that brought genuine joy rather than obligation. I had joined professional organizations, started taking art classes, and built a social circle of people who valued me for who I was rather than what I could provide. Most significantly, I had met someone who appreciated my success rather than being threatened by it. Michael Chin was a fellow CPA who worked for a different firm, and our relationship was built on shared interests, mutual respect, and genuine compatibility rather than financial dependency or family obligation. I love that you're passionate about your career and your independence, he had told me early in our relationship. It's attractive when someone knows their own worth and isn't willing to compromise it for other people's comfort. Dating someone who celebrated my achievements rather than minimizing them was a revelation that helped me understand how much emotional energy I had wasted on people who fundamentally didn't respect my accomplishments. But the ultimate validation of my decision came through developments in my family that I learned about through extended relatives rather than direct contact. David and Ashley's marriage had not survived the financial pressure that resulted from losing access to my support. Without my money subsidizing their lifestyle, they had been forced to confront the reality that their relationship was built on shared entitlement rather than shared values. According to cousin Jennifer, who had become my primary source of family information, the breakdown had been swift and dramatic. Ashley blamed David for ruining their relationship with his rich sister, and David blamed Ashley for destroying their family support system with her big mouth, Jennifer reported during one of our regular phone calls. They spent more time fighting about whose fault it was that you stopped helping them than they did trying to solve their problems independently. The marriage had lasted exactly 18 months after their wedding, long enough for them to accumulate substantial debt trying to maintain a lifestyle they couldn't afford, but not long enough for them to develop the maturity and communication skills that might have made their relationship sustainable. David had moved back into our parents' basement, a 30-year-old college graduate working part-time at a sports bar while figuring out his next move. Ashley had moved back with her parents, whose tanning salon empire was apparently less prosperous than they had pretended during wedding planning. But the most telling development was how they handled their divorce. Unable to afford lawyers or mediation services, they had asked various family members to help with legal fees, everyone except me. David specifically told people not to ask you for money, Jennifer explained. He said he was too proud to request help from someone who had abandoned the family when they needed her most. The irony was perfect. David had finally developed too much pride to ask for help from someone he had spent 5 years treating as a personal bank account, but only after learning that his treatment had consequences. Meanwhile, my parents had gradually begun to understand what they had lost when I stopped providing financial support for the family. Dad's construction business had struggled through another difficult winter without my assistance with cash flow problems. Mom had been forced to take a part-time job for the first time in 20 years to help cover household expenses. The most significant change came 8 months after David's divorce, when Mom called with something that sounded like a genuine apology rather than a strategic attempt to restore financial access. Rachel, I need you to know that I've been thinking a lot about how we treated you over the years, and I realize we took advantage of your generosity in ways that weren't fair or healthy for any of us. The words were everything I had wanted to hear for years, but I was cautious about their motivation. What made you realize that, Mom? Watching David and Ashley's marriage fall apart and seeing how your father and I struggled financially without your help made me understand that we had become dependent on you in ways that weren't sustainable. We treated your success like it was something that belonged to all of us instead of respecting that it was your achievement. I appreciate you saying that, Mom. I also need to apologize for not speaking up when Ashley was rude to you at the wedding. I was so focused on avoiding conflict that I let someone treat my daughter badly, and that was wrong. The apology felt genuine rather than strategic, which made it both more meaningful and more painful. If Mom had been capable of this kind of insight and accountability years earlier, we might have avoided the crisis entirely. Mom, I appreciate the apology, but I need you to understand that I'm not going back to the old arrangement where I fund family expenses while being treated like an afterthought. I understand that, and I'm not asking you to. I just want to know if there's a way for us to have a relationship that's based on love and respect rather than money. The conversation was the beginning of a slow rebuilding process that took months of careful navigation. Mom had to learn how to have conversations with me that weren't focused on financial needs, and I had to learn how to trust family members who had spent years prioritizing my usefulness over my well-being. But the real test of our family's capacity for change came 10 months later when I announced my engagement to Michael. The news created an opportunity for everyone to demonstrate whether they had actually learned from the lessons of the previous 2 years. David's response was particularly telling. Instead of requesting financial assistance with wedding expenses or assuming that I would help with his life situation, he sent a simple congratulations card with a handwritten note. Rachel, I'm happy that you found someone who appreciates you the way you deserve to be appreciated. I know I haven't been the brother you deserved, but I hope someday we can build a better relationship based on who we actually are rather than what we can do for each other. Congratulations on your engagement and everything you've accomplished. The note was the first communication from David that acknowledged my achievements without requesting assistance, and it gave me hope that he might finally be developing the maturity and self-awareness that had been missing from his earlier behavior. As I sit here today, sharing this story with all of you, I'm struck by how much my life has changed since I found the courage to walk out of that wedding reception and stop funding relationships that diminished me while benefiting from my success. The wedding that was supposed to be David and Ashley's perfect day had actually been the catalyst for me to build a life based on genuine respect, mutual benefit, and authentic relationships rather than family obligation and financial exploitation. The question I want to leave you with is this: are there relationships in your life where people benefit from your generosity while treating you with casual disrespect? Have you ever found yourself funding celebrations where your presence was treated as an embarrassment rather than an honor? And here's the deeper question: when you finally set boundaries with people who were taking advantage of your kindness, did it destroy those relationships or force them to become healthier and more honest? Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stop enabling toxic behavior and let people discover their own capacity for growth and self-respect. I'd love to hear your stories about setting boundaries with family members who took your support for granted, dealing with people who wanted your resources but not your respect, or discovering that your true worth became clear only when you stopped accepting poor treatment from people who should have valued you. Drop your experiences in the comments below. These stories help other people understand that they don't have to accept humiliation from people whose lifestyles they're supporting, and that sometimes walking away from toxic family dynamics is the first step toward building the relationships and life you actually deserve. If this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about family boundaries, financial independence, and the courage it takes to choose self-respect over people-pleasing. Share this video with anyone who might be struggling with similar dynamics, where their generosity is being exploited by people who should know better. Thank you for listening to my story and for being part of this community where we can talk honestly about the complex realities of family relationships and personal boundaries. Remember that you don't have to accept poor treatment from people whose prosperity depends on your continued support, and that the people who truly love you will appreciate your contributions rather than taking them for granted while treating you badly. Don't forget to comment with your own boundary-setting experiences, like this video if it helped you process similar family dynamics, subscribe for more honest conversations about difficult relationships, and share this story with anyone who needs to hear that their generosity should be met with gratitude, not entitlement and disrespect. Until next time, remember that you have the right to be treated with dignity by people who benefit from your kindness, and that healthy family relationships are based on mutual respect and appreciation rather than one-sided financial support disguised as family obligation. Sometimes the best gift you can give someone is the opportunity to learn what your support was actually worth by experiencing life without it.